All right, everyone, welcome. My name is Penny Pearson. Hopefully, you are here this evening for our Master Food Preserver online delivery program and how to dehydrate food with a freeze dryer. As I said, my name is Penny Pearson, and our Q&A monitor tonight is Paige Weiskirch, and our panelists are Tim Long, give a wave, Tim, as well as myself, give a wave, and Shalinda Wilkins. We'll be talking to you on this subject tonight. We are recording, so we'll give a link to the handout at the end of the session after you take a short survey. So a little bit of Zoom housekeeping. Please keep your microphones muted. It just keeps the background noise down. During live question sessions, you're more than welcome to unmute and speak, or you can raise your little Zoom hand kind of in class and let us know that you have a question. Also, we would appreciate that you use the Q&A box, and it should be down at the bottom of your screen. You'll see a little button there that says Q&A. And if for some reason you don't, there's a little button that says More. And if you click on that, that will also allow you to get to the Q&A. If you'd like to turn on transcripts, you can also see that on this menu as well. So this allows us to monitor your questions and get to them as quickly as possible. All that we ask is just when you're ready to ask a question during the open question time, please feel free to unmute your microphones. So who are we as the Master Food Preserver program, our online delivery program? We're very much community outreach. We're all online based. We're grant funded. And every one of us you see presenting tonight and working in the background are volunteers. We're housed within the University of California Division of Agriculture and Natural Resources. And we want to provide up-to-date research-based information on food safety and preservation. Since we are volunteers, we do not speak for the University of California. However, every now and then we're going to mention a product. It's not an endorsement, or we're not in opposition of any particular organization or product or services, but basically you're going to hear from us from our experiences and what we use. So we really want to keep Californians safe in food preservation, as well allowing them to use culturally appropriate and those research-based practices to safely preserve food. We want to do that in the home. We want to reduce food waste. We want to increase food security. And we want to provide engaging ways that Californians can explore these options for themselves and their families. Today's program is real straightforward. We're going to start with Tim today on how freeze drying works, a little bit of science, and then I'm going to talk about freeze drying and using it for meals. And then Shalinda's got the fun part. She gets to talk about fun with freeze drying. And it might be the reason why you're all here, but stick around. So we'll get started right away. And remember, please keep those microphones muted as we continue through the program. So I'm going to turn it over to Tim. Tim, whenever you're ready, I've got my finger on the button.
Well, push the magic button. So, good evening, everyone, and welcome. Even though we'll be talking about a freeze dryer, this is still a dehydration process. It's designed to remove the moisture or water from your product, just like the dehydration processes we discussed in a presentation on Zoom a month or so ago. Okay, so like in a standard dehydrator or air drying or solar drying or other methods, this one just involves freezing, okay? It does the same thing. Your end product is a dehydrated product. Next, please.
Ooh, let me get the button over there. Sorry.
So for a comparison quickly of drying methods, a conventional drying will dry fruit to about a 20% moisture level, and veggies will also go a little bit better than that at a 10% moisture level. Freeze drying, however, can take it all the way down to a 2% moisture level, removing more water, which makes it a little bit safer and a little bit more long lasting for stability. Next, please. So how does freeze drying actually work? Um, so step one, go ahead, is pre-freezing the product in your home freezer. So trays of food are placed in the freeze dryer's chamber, but previously or pre-freeze drying helps speed up the overall process if the trays are first frozen in your freezer before placing them in the freeze dryer. The machine will freeze the food to a temperature between -30 and -50 degrees Fahrenheit or -34 to -45 degrees centigrade. Also shown in the photo at the right is an empty tray with a silicone mat in the bottom and adjustable dividers, which can be configured to create various size freeze-dried products like soup or other things into smaller units to be packaged individually, say in 1 cup portions, larger or smaller, depending on how you want to rehydrate and use. There's also a plastic cover or dome type thing that goes over the top of it so that you can stack those in your freezer. Okay, next, please. So the question is for step 2, do I have to program the machine? Well, no, not really. All you have to do is make sure to properly prepare the food, make sure the freeze dryer trays are clean and sanitized, place the trays in the machine, and follow the directions on the digital panel on the front of the machine. The internal programming takes care of the process, the example, the time, the temperature, and the drying. No guesswork. So on the left, you can see the control panel up in the upper right-hand corner of the machine. There is a gasket that helps seal the machine off when you close the door. And then the trays go inside and the area there that shows the shelves. So you power up the freeze dryer with the power switch in the back. You wait for the control panel to appear, like in the center upper picture. Next, you touch start to begin the cooling process, and it will tell you at that point to wait 15 minutes before loading the trays. And what it's doing is trying to cool down the interior of the machine before you actually put your trays in. And once the chamber is cooled, it will say place your trays into the freeze dryer and close the drain valve. Okay, next, please. So what's happening then once all of this goes in and your machine is running? What actually happens is called sublimation. A vacuum pump pulls the air out of the chamber and the trays are slightly heated. As the water in the food heats, it sublimates, which means ice is directly converted from solid to water vapor and is removed from the product. This process automatically removes up to 98% of the water in the food. Photo on the right shows the water that has been removed and is now relocated on the sides of the interior of the chamber holding the trays. So it was taken out of the food, converted to a vapor, and now it's condensed onto the sides of the interior of the machine. Okay, the picture on the left is of a vacuum pump, which this particular one is for a Harvest Right freeze dryer. So next, please. So what happens to microorganisms in the freeze drying process? This is a real concern because we want to make sure that we deal with the bacteria or viruses or molds. As a additional safety notice here, drying does not kill all microorganisms. Once food is rehydrated, it will spoil again. If it's not cooked or consumed within 2 hours of rehydrating, then refrigerate it. The microorganisms stay viable but dormant, even under the extreme conditions of freeze drying. So please understand, therefore, when home freeze drying raw foods, the microorganisms on those raw foods will remain viable, then activate upon rehydration. Food items that are traditionally cooked before eating must also be cooked before eating as a freeze-dried food. Examples would be raw meats, raw seafood, raw eggs, and foods containing any of those ingredients. Okay, next, please. So now that the program has run, how do you know if your food is fully dry? So this photo is of my field notes from a recent product run in my machine. The measurements are in grams, as grams make it easier for the calculations to be made rather than ounces. That darn metric system. So Weigh the trays before being placed in the unit. You'll see at the top I have start. That's the starting weight when I first put them in the machine. And then when the machine says they are dry, weigh them again. Then run the dry cycle one more time, which is usually about a 2-hour run. If the weight is the same as the last time when you checked it, it is as dry as it will get. So there's the first run when the machine said it was dry, that under this first column, and then under the second, you can see is pretty much the same, a slight difference, but very little. If it's lower weight again, then you should run the dry cycle again and weigh. I made the mistake of not doing that with some grapes I ran one time and ended up with them all stuck together in a big jar because I hadn't checked to make sure they were completely dry. Okay. So now let's talk about storage upon completion. Place your freeze-dried food in an airtight container. Otherwise, it will begin to reabsorb moisture from the air and spoil. Now, for this purpose, as on the picture on the left, you can use Mylar bags, which would then be heat sealed, or you could use vacuum sealed plastic bags or airtight jars. Now, the center and right picture show a portable air remover that goes on top of your jar when the lid is on, but not the ring. And it goes on and it basically just sucks the air out. And when you pull it off, then you can test to make sure by just pulling on the lid like you would a normal process for water bath or pressure canning to see if it's for sure sealed. For a 25-year shelf life, the Mylar bags are the easiest and least expensive option. You should add an oxygen absorber to make sure the oxygen isn't in your bag and will destroy your food over time. Then simply seal the bag with an impulse sealer or even just a hot iron or a flat iron. Vacuum sealed plastic bags are another good option for all foods except meats or other high protein foods, which just that does not work well with them. Simple airtight jars like the ones shown in the pictures work well for snacks and such things as fruits and vegetables, yogurt, or even cheesecake and ice cream. These can easily store in a pantry for a few months without adding an oxygen absorber. Just remember to seal the jar tight after you grab your goodies. The jar is a canning jar sealed with a portable jar sealer. And the reason that that's done is if this is something that you're going to get into and use fairly often, this is probably the best method to go because if you open up that Mylar bag, you're going to have to go through the whole sealing process and everything once again. Mylar bags, they say, will maintain food for a 25-year shelf life, but home freeze dryers have not been out for 25 years yet, so we can't be absolutely positive of that. However, there's been a lot of commercial freeze drying done and tests run on that, which have shown that that is the case. Okay, next. Rehydrate your freeze dried food. There's a couple of different methods. The weight method, the first one, is the most precise, where you weigh the tray before and after freeze drying to determine the exact amount of water lost. The volume method, which is kind of a general rule, is that you start with a 1-to-1 ratio of warm water to food for most items. As an example, 1 cup of water per 1 cup of food. Time and temperature is important. Use warm or hot water, not boiling, to speed up the process. Rehydration takes generally 5 to 20 minutes, depending on the food density. And then covering will also help if you cover the dish with foil while it's standing to help trap steam and evenly distribute moisture. Okay. How about how much does it cost to run? That's usually a big question. The cost estimate for freeze dryers by Harvest Right with a medium 5-tray dryer, you determine the kilowatt hours of runtime times your electric charge gives you the cost to run. Now, in this case, the numbers I'm showing, the picture at the left is the actual amp or wattage usage meter that I tied into my system to figure out how many kilowatts I was using. A typical freeze dryer machine, a medium, runs on about 8 amps and is on a 20 amp circuit. I ran a batch with 3 trays of small diced onions and 2 trays of French onion soup. I pre-froze all 5 trays. The total runtime to completion was 30 hours and 37 minutes, using 22.59 kilowatt hours. My current electric charge is 0.17759 cents per kilowatt hour. So multiplying this times the kilowatt hours used, the total cost for my run on these particular trays was $4.01. 30.37 hours is 1.27 days, so the cost per day of your electricity charge would be $3.16 per day, or 24 hours. Next, please. By comparison, to run a conventional dehydrator like the one on the left, which is my old Nesco vertical round dehydrator, I put it in the same room as my freeze dryer. I plugged it into the same 20 amp circuit and ran it at 145 degrees as directed for fruits and vegetables for the same amount of time as the previous test. In the almost 32-hour runtime, it used 5.14 kilowatt hours for a cost in my electric service of 91 cents. So yes, it's obviously quite a bit cheaper to run a conventional dehydrator. But remember, freeze drying will remove 98% of the moisture. Okay, next. How much do these fancy things cost? Well, home freeze dryers typically cost actually, you can get them as low as $1,500 and in excess of $5,000, with prices varying based on size, small, medium, large, or extra large, and what features you get with it. The most popular medium-sized units generally retail for around $2,500 to $3,000, and they include a vacuum pump, trays, and a starter kit for long-term food storage. Okay, next, please. How much capacity by model or approximate fresh food capacity? A small unit, which typically will have 3 or possibly 4 trays, will hold 6 to 10 pounds per batch. A medium will hold 10 to 15 pounds per batch. A large at 18 to 27 pounds, and the extra large at 40 to 50 pounds per batch, or 10,000 pounds of product per year. Okay, next. Oh, well, back up one penny, I'm sorry. And now the information that I showed there was provided by Harvest Right. It's not intended as an endorsement of their product, as there are other manufacturers with similar units. Because I own a Harvest Right medium 5-tray unit, it is what I am most experienced with, and due to the high initial investment, I personally only own one freeze dryer. There are at least 4 freeze dryers today, which are all manufactured in the USA. So Google them and figure out which one you feel will work best for you. There are also some foreign-made models, but I would recommend staying with USA products. Okay, now questions.
Thank you, Tim. Do we have any questions from the audience? Can you go ahead and you can raise your hand, or you can just turn on your microphone. Say hello.
We don't have any questions waiting in the Q&A just yet, so maybe while people are thinking of it, Tim, can you talk for just a moment maybe about the device you use to remove the air from the jar and what that's good for and what it's not good for?
Okay, yeah,
If you know what I mean.
Yeah, all it does, uh, if you preserve food by any of the normal preservation methods like boiling water or pressure canning, you know that one of the important parts is sealing the jar. This particular little instrument, what it does is the round portion that you saw on top will fit over the jar with the lid, not the ring, just the lid on it. And then the device goes on the top of it, you turn it on, and basically it sucks all the air out. And after it runs, you can tell that it has slowed down. You can turn it off and remove it and check to make sure. And just like with other types of canning, the little bump that's on top of your lid will now be depressed, showing that it's sealed, and you can pick it up. Here I am, I'm showing. Pick it up by the lid to make sure that it's sealed. Um, that's used primarily for shorter term storage, like I said, with maybe herbs or something that you're going to get into fairly often in when you're cooking meals and using it. It's not really designed that well for long-term storage, but it works really well for the short term.
Thanks, Tim. We've got a bunch of great questions in the Q&A. So the first
Uh-oh.
one is Shanda asked, she said, in step 4, you mentioned something about not being good for meat. Could you recap that again?
That was in I think in the plastic storage. Meat does not store well in plastic storage. Mylar bags are better, or even the jars for short-term storage are better than a plastic container of some sort, because they obviously will allow more light in, which helps degrade the product. And it has been shown that they actually will allow some air to enter through the plastic. So Mylar is the best way to go if you're going to bag it.
Thank you, Tim. All right, our next question. Sandra wanted to know, what is the percentage for proper dryness? Your example listed 28%.
Well, no, what my example showed was 28 grams of water. That was not the percentage. That doesn't relate to the 98%. And that weight tells you how much by volume of water was taken out. Now, if you run it twice and you get the same number of dryness, that should be, then the percentage would likely be at 98%. The 28 grams of water would equal 98% of the total water that had been in the product. So the difference there is that 28 is volume and the 98 is just a percentage of total water.
Thanks, Tim. All right, we have another question here. Let's see. Kelly asked, is there a specific manual recipe book that we would recommend for freeze drying? With so many options out there, it's difficult to choose, even based on the reviews.
I can answer that one.
So
for Tim, yeah.
I really like a site that's called freezedryingsupplies.com. That's the URL for it. Because they do have a recipe book that's contributed to, and there's like over 350 or so recipes in the book, and it's updated almost weekly. You can subscribe to it, or you can subscribe to the online version of that particular book, or you can get a hard copy. And they also sell additional supplies like the trays and the mats and the lids that I showed in an earlier picture. And they do sell those things for other than, it's primarily Harvest-Right, but they do sell them for some of the other machines as well. So that was freezedryingsupplies.com.
I'll grab the link in just a moment and put that in the chat for everybody. Let's see, there was another really good question. Where does the moisture go during the process? Is it drained off somewhere?
Oh, did
You want me
I?
to go back to that picture?
Yeah, what it does is it freezes it and then it slightly heats it, and this is the sublimation that I mentioned. It creates a vapor.
Right here.
Yeah, which the picture on the right. Oops, there.
Right here.
Picture
Sorry,
on the right.
got click happy there.
Once it's
This right here.
heated and pulled out and made into a vapor, then it condenses, so to speak, on the sides of the chamber that the trays go in. And what you will see is that white area there to the left side of the picture, that's all ice. So what happens then, once you are complete, you can pull out, you're completely satisfied with how dry it is, then you pull out your trays and you can then go back to the display and say defrost, and that'll run a defrost cycle. you open up the plug on the side, the drain plug, and it will defrost all that ice and dry out your machine.
We have a couple more questions and then we're going to run out of time, but we will try to answer your questions in the chat or here in the Q&A. We'll try to enter them. Type your answers for them if we can't get to them. But a good question is there an issue with running the machines back to back between batches?
No, not really. The only thing you might check is to make sure that where your trays slide in is still clean. And one thing that I didn't get into because I was just talking about the process is you wouldn't want to run, say, garlic and peaches at the same time, because obviously garlic is a very rather aromatic thing, and you're going to get some garlicky tasting peaches possibly. So, like sizes is important when you put your product in, that all you don't have big chunks and little chunks. They should all be about the same size. And that's why I think I showed the diced diced onions. And watch out for, I try not to run two different types of products at once, but you can, what happens is you don't have to go ahead and defrost the whole thing. You can go ahead and restart another batch. You just make sure that it's clean and ready to go, that your trays are ready, put them in and start it over.
Thank you. I think we're running out of time to answer some questions live. We will have time at the end of the program for anything we miss. And I'll do my best to keep answering the questions in the Q&A as we move forward.
Thank you, Paige. Thank you, Tim. Now we're moving on to the next section, which happens to be mine, and that is freeze drying and making meals. So anytime you're dealing with food, we want to make sure that we're dealing with a nice, clean environment, whether you're going to be doing canning or you're just fixing dinner. You want to make sure that you have a clean surface, because we have all these microorganisms around and some of them can actually make us sick. So let's make sure that we do all of those clean things, of your surface of areas are clean, even anything that you touch frequently. And I was always surprised at how dirty your phone can get. So, tie back your hair, wear an apron, gather up all of your utensils, get your recipe together and your ingredients. And if you're using fresh produce, of course, you need to wash that. So I'm going to talk about what I did in terms of quick meals. I started out my freeze drying journey with freeze drying ingredients separately. So in this particular photo here, in the background, I have large jars that have freeze dried hamburger, just plain hamburger, freeze dried taco meat, which was seasoned hamburger, basically. Also, sausage in the third one there from the left. And then the last one on the far right is a half a jar of poblano peppers that I had freeze dried. In the foreground, I have jars of the sliced scallions or green onions, and then the corn. Now, somebody asked about recipes before. I would get a lot of my recipes not only from Harvest, right? Because I have the same machine. I have a medium machine with 4 trays in it. They have great recipes and great videos online. And then I also would freeze dry my own recipes, my own things that I would cook every day. And I really appreciate that because I like not having to waste food. So my first adventures really started out with simple meals. And most of my grandchildren, they love Top Ramen meals, but I do not, because it's just noodles and a seasoning packet. So I started making freeze-dried super ramen, basically. And I would take those squares of ramen and I'd break it up and I'd put about a quarter in. And now I put more in because my kids like more noodles. But then I would add my own freeze-dried shredded chicken, freeze-dried corn, green onions, mushrooms. I would use the seasoning packs, but I found them so salty that I ended up converting over and using a granular broth seasoning, like a, chicken bouillon or something like that. And the image on the left is the pint jar. So that's how big it is. So 16 ounces with all my goodies in it, and it's shelf stable. And I would vacuum seal it like what you saw Tim doing in terms of getting the air out. And then I would, when I wanted a quick lunch or my grandkids came over, I would boil water and I'd turn off the kettle and let it sit for a minute or two. So it's not bubbling away. It's just really hot. and I'd put it into my jar and I would cover it and I would have a meal within 3 to 5 minutes. So that was my first adventures in freeze drying. I started then realizing, hey, I have a really hard time cooking for just two people. So I would have a lot of leftovers. And I discovered that I could start freeze drying my leftovers. And I did it like, they could be casseroles, they could be skillet meals. And the photo on the left is showing those Mylar bags again. And some of my recipes, which was a sausage veggie omelet. So I had eggs in there, sausage, lots of different vegetables. I did a double cheeseburger skillet, which, believe it or not, even has freeze-dried cheese in it. And then the spicy chicken with peanut sauce is another that had rice and all kinds of chicken and other veggies. And I would try to write on my Mylar bags what the directions were to rehydrate. On the next photo is using Harvest Right bags and other meals that I would freeze dry: chicken tortellini, beef stroganoff. All of these things were, what I would cook for my family. And I love that because oftentimes when I wanted to can something, it was more difficult to take my personal recipes and make sure that they were safe for home canning. What I like about freeze drying is that I can cook them exactly the way I like them with all the things that I want in them, and I can freeze dry them. I just have to be careful when I rehydrate them. I can reactivate those same, bacteria or things in it. So it has to be eaten right away. It's not something that's going to sit around on the counter for a couple of days. So I used Tim's method where I would weigh my trays going into the machine. I would weigh them at the end of the cycle and I would do another 2-hour run and weigh them again. This was a great way to check that they were really completely dry. And I actually even got one of those wood moisture meters and would poke my food. It's not worth it. Just weigh it. It's far easier. So some things did not work. Okay. Freeze drying high fat foods, high sugar foods is not very easy. And I had some big fails. I tried to freeze dry Hoisin sauce. No, not worth it. It just made a big mess. So I turned to commercial suppliers and I found things like, who knew, freeze dried Worcestershire sauce and the sour cream powder, the cream cheese powder. These were commercial products. They, got bigger machines and higher processes, et cetera. But it allowed me to use my own recipes still and create even new ones by using these types of commercial products to round out my ingredients I use in my meals. So resources, someone asked about recipes. This is one that I started with that I really appreciate. Chef Tess is her name. She, at the time that this book was written, she was the main chef for Honeyville Farms. They do a lot of freeze-dried foods. I mean, you can buy the big, big gallon type jars or cans of freeze-dried stuff. And she did meals. And so I was like, well, I can freeze dry my own chicken. I don't have to buy it from a commercial producer. And she has great recipes and she's very good about offering the right rehydration ratios as well. Many extension service across the country are starting to offer more information about freeze drying. Social media has a whole lot. You just have to realize, use your own recipes because it allows you to freeze dry your own food. And you have your own family recipes. I know you do. And there are lots of information about being able to rehydrate those using the means that Tim mentioned before. So that was kind of my journey with freeze drying food. I just ran a batch of cheese the other day and I've got it in my little Mylar bags and I'm open up to take any questions, or if there's more in the chat or in the Q&A page, you can direct us there.
Right now we're good for questions. Tim is currently typing an answer to the last question. So we caught up, and thank you everybody for patience. There were some excellent, really good questions there. One of the things that several of the questions kind of asked about was the back-to-back sort of freezing of things. So when you're doing recipes, when maybe you could talk just quickly about, are you able then to freeze dry sort of all the components at once, or are you doing this over the course of, is it one day you're freeze drying the vegetables, another day you're doing something else, and then you put it together later, or kind of what's
Right.
the efficiency of that? Like, is this a month-long project, or is this something I'm doing
No,
over a long
I am
weekend?
I'm much more efficient now because I recognized, realized, and went, oh, aha moment that when I cook, because I can't cook for two people, I would then put the leftover food. So I'll use chili for an example. I can't make just a 4 serving pot of chili. It's more like, half a gallon. So I would use those same trays that Tim showed earlier that had the little dividers on it, and I could put in half cup or 1 cup servings, and then I would put it in my home freezer. So I have a freezer, and it's got a shelf dedicated for my freeze drying trays. And then, 2 days later, maybe I made my cheeseburger skillet or something, and whatever was left over, did the same thing. I often will do, because I find stuff on sale, or I'll grab one of those big box stores rotisserie chicken, and I'll strip that down and I'll put it on a tray and stick it in the freezer. When I have 4 trays, I run a batch. And that's mixing. Okay, that is mixing, but they're generally so many different ingredients that it's not like running a batch of onions, because those do get pretty pungent when you run them in a freeze dryer. So, that I will do separate. And I specifically will do 4 trays of chopped onions. And same for garlic. I have big, huge containers of garlic. So that was my
Thanks,
journey, because I started with the single items. And then I realized, because I wanted to do some traveling and some backpacking, I could take my own meals with me. And I literally could pour hot water into the Mylar bag and I would have a meal. But then I kind of graduated from having doing my own food.
Let me interrupt you for a second, Penny. We have a couple questions that I think you can answer together. Someone wants to know, when you freeze dry soup, do you only freeze dry the ingredients but not the water?
No,
And
I
then the
freeze
second
dry.
question, I'm going to ask you, and this is it's a
Okay.
two-part. And then the second question is, do you cook things first or freeze raw?
Myself, I cook things first right now, though I have watched and seen, and I've seen folks that will freeze dry steaks, and they freeze dry them raw, and they will reconstitute them in water, and they'll get them rehydrated, and then they throw them on the grill. And I've seen people do taste tests, and they say they can't tell the difference between the fresh steak and the one that they reconstituted and put on the grill. I personally have not tried that. I don't know if my other panelists have tried freeze-dried raw meat and then cooking it. So I would say, yes, you can do it, but I have not. So the other one is I freeze dry soups. So I will make like the cheese tortellini or soup or whatever. And I'll just put them on my trays. And that means everything. The consistency of the soup, whether it's a cream of mushroom soup or something like a creamy soup versus a broth-based soup, they go into the freeze dryer. The difference is, the more moisture in the product, the more of that ice ring you're going to get on your chamber, because it's doing that sublimation process of pulling all that moisture out. Any other questions?
Thank you. Somebody asked, can you freeze dry like things like bread and pizza? So
yes, you can. In fact, that's one of the test runs that Harvest Right recommends for testing your machine, is to run a batch of bread. And I know a lot of people are like, well, what would I ever do with that? But it's also another way that people have taken the smell of like garlic and onions out of their machine. They'll run a batch of bread through it.
And Shalinda, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Mm-hmm.
As far as rehydrating the bread, it never really rehydrates correctly. So consider it more like an additive, or if you're doing like a bread pudding, or if you want it, maybe some breadcrumbs that you want to plump back up when you rehydrate it. It's never going to be bread. It's more like a breadcrumb. Just be aware of that.
Could you use it for something like, could you freeze dry bread cubes and then sort of like the way you dehydrate them and then use them for things like stuffing?
Yes. Yes, because you're planning to make it moist again in a kind of a gooey way, because it doesn't rehydrate with the fluffiness of fresh bread. Sorry.
No, but stuffing and bread pudding are pretty delicious, so I think that's still okay. Thank you, Shalinda. Thanks, Penny.
Thank you. All right.
think-
Well, then we're ready to move along to what I like to call the fun with freeze drying. Shalinda's going to talk to you about her journey with freeze drying, at least on the fun side. So, Shalinda, go ahead.
All right, next, please. So let's talk about freeze drying candy, fruit, frozen desserts, and of course, amazing gifts, plus a few mistakes to avoid. Next. Oh, I'm sorry. Stop. This picture is of strawberries. So at the top of the image on the right, you have homemade freeze-dried strawberries, and at the bottom are commercial freeze-dried strawberries. If you do it yourself, you can pick the size and you can pick how it's cut. Next. So this, first, let's talk about the image. The image is of circus peanuts. At the top, that's after the freeze dry, and at the bottom is what it originally looks like. So candy is the easiest place to start freeze drying because you can buy store-bought like gummies or Skittles or M&Ms or something, or you can make it at home. So vinegar candies, taffies, and of course fudges. Then when you freeze dry them, they become light, puffy, and they intensify the flavor. And then after you do freeze dry them, you can sell them, you can gift them, or just use them as a snack. Try to avoid straight chocolate. It has too much fat. Next, please. So the picture on your right is of fruit, specifically apples with a little caramel drizzle on it. So if you do not like a lot of sugar, you can always choose just do fruit. It intensifies the flavor. For fruit, you want to make sure you cut it equally so it dries evenly and it's better as far as the crunch you're going to get. Now, you can spice it up. Apple cinnamons with apples, chili on mango. You can coat it before or after to bake in that flavor. If you want a cleaner look, you want to do it after. Another way of coating it would be chocolate or candy coating. They both work well. And for the chocolate, you're going to do it after always. But for the candy coating, you could actually do it before and get a kind of explosion look. Next, please. So in these pictures, of course, you have frozen ice cream on one side, which is the left, and that's ice cream sandwiches. And on the right, you have cheesecake. So freeze-dried ice cream, you can scoop it, freeze it solid, and then just run it through. Or you can just take it directly from the store, stick it in the freeze dryer like I did with the ice cream sandwiches, and it becomes crunchy, shelf stable. The same goes for pies. So you could take slices of cheesecake, pumpkin pie, blueberry, apple. Just note that the crust won't be the same, but it does give you a shelf-stable dessert brick of your own. Next, please. So let's talk about gifts. The gifts are made easy. Why? Because all you have to do is freeze dry them. So here's the easiest things. I've given you a list. So on your left-hand side, you have the peppermint and marshmallow gift bag, which is just literally freeze-dried peppermint wheels. And they take about 30 minutes to make. And then you have a hot chocolate puck. And then you have freeze-dried marshmallows, which just kind of dissolve in that. And on your right-hand side, you have a bag of cheesecake, freeze-dried cheesecake. It works on everything. Other ideas, of course, are chocolate-covered fruit, chocolate-covered ice cream, caramels on that apple with an apple cider pack, and you'll have a recipe inside the handout. Don't worry about it. Next, please. Now, if you prefer savory, like in this picture on the right-hand side, that's actually veggie chips mix. So there's some golden beets, some bell peppers, and some radishes. But you can also do spice mixes. So think ranch dressing, where you would freeze dry all the herbs and then just layer it in a container or a bag. It's your choice. Also, if you want to make foods such as that chili, you could actually freeze all the ingredients separately and layer it as a Christmas gift or a coworker's birthday too. Next, please. Now, here is a fun gift, the gift of drinks. So you can do soda mixes, which are add-ins, blender mixes, where you blend in things, or of course, tea mixes. So for the soda mix, like the picture on your right, you see my strawberries and cream Dr. Pepper. Switch out the soda. All it is freeze-dried strawberries with some heavy whipping cream and the soda, and you get that filled. For something like a blender, think of a green smoothie. So you would freeze dry like the kale, and then what you would do is powder it and then put all the fruits that you want in it as well. If you want it thick, leave them thick. If you don't, blend it up with that kale smoothie, put it in a little pack and take it with you, freeze dry. Just add water or, of course, coconut water if you prefer something with more hydration. As for teas, you can use freeze dried standard store teas, or you can actually just use the mixes themselves, such as the herb mixes that I was talking about earlier. Same thing. This time you would just use like hibiscus with cranberries and then just add your favorite tea to it. And that works. Next, please. Now let's do some troubleshooting. There's two problems you're going to have. One is the recipe and the other is the machine. Next, please. Oh, I'm sorry. This image is an image of hummus, freeze-dried hummus. And next to it are just some bagel chips. It's my son's snack. He just adds water from his lunch bag and he's fine. Next, please. So, number one problem you're going to have, recipes. So if your recipe has high fat, high sugar, or alcohol, you're probably going to have issues. Now, you can have a little alcohol. So if you're doing like a pasta dish and it has a little alcohol, it's not going to be a problem. I'm talking about if this was like 60, 70% alcohol, then you would have a lot of problems. As far as fats, normally we render them out. So if you're doing like a bacon or something, you have to take off as much fat as possible because fat doesn't really freeze, nor does it really dissolve off of it. Same with sugar. With sugar, it's the opposite. It'll actually get to the point where it could give you a huge explosion and you could be cleaning candy for the next 3 batches if you're not careful, because you won't see that little speck underneath. Now, the image on your left is of freeze-dried guacamole. So in the front of the plate are 2 squares using that grid system we talked about during Tim's area to make the perfect portion of guacamole. And that's just water added. I didn't measure it like Tim and Penny do. I just add a little water and mix it until I get to the thickness I prefer. And around it are tortilla chips, of course. Next, please. Now, machine issues. This is a troubleshooting for it. So most likely you're going to have 3 issues. One is the gasket. If you put the gasket on wrong, it won't seal and it can even leak. Don't worry, the machine will catch it and tell you. But this comes to our second problem, forgotten steps. You'll get the steps on the screen, but you'll forget to push continue. So if it tells you the gasket isn't sealing, you need to fix it. And if your gasket is done correctly, you'll see this faint little black line going all the way around. If you don't, you need to open it, move the gasket until you get the perfect seal. Also, if you forget it too long, it will literally sit there, and that could cause other problems, such as, remember, you have it in a vacuum, it's cold. If it waits too long, it could warm up. Is that likely? No, you'll catch it before then. The third problem is the vacuum pump, not because it's going to break down, but because old oil can leave a taste on the food. It's very chemical-like. Even though the machine will tell you to change it, you'll be tempted not to change it because it's a little work, but it's worth it. You do not want the oil taste. And this is a picture of my freeze dryer doing, of course, the peppermint wells and candy canes for Christmas. Next, please. So, do you have any questions about candy? Go ahead and give them to me, and that's it.
So we do have a question for you. Judy wants to know, do you run the ice cream or cheesecake on candy mode or regular mode?
So the ice cream and the cheesecake are ran on regular mode. And if you're using Harvest Right, they have an app that will give you the exact times if you want it perfectly done in the shortest amount of time. Now for the candy mode, that's more of, think of anything that's shelf stable already that you want to extend the shelf stable quality of it, or you want to change the flavor and texture. So for instance, when I make a peanut butter fudge, it has a short shelf life because it's fudge. But when I freeze dry it, it gets light and fluffy. And so I can store it in a Mylar bag or in a glass container, which is really where it's going. And then I can eat it for months instead of just having it for a month.
Any
Thank you. We
others?
have another question. Somebody wants to know, can you make bake brownies in your trays, and then after they cool, put them in the freezer and then to the freeze dryer, which actually just a great bigger question is, are those trays oven safe where you could sort of make something and then go right to the freezer to freeze it and then right to the freeze dryer to freeze dry it? Or are they specific to your freeze dryer and maybe not heat safe that way?
Okay, so they're stainless steel trays. You could put them in the oven, but I don't know what they're rated for because the manufacturer hasn't thought of it that way. However, if you're in the actual communities of the freeze dryers, they'll tell you that for certain candies, you want to preheat it, and some of the older machines don't preheat. So they have to go to the oven and directly to the machine. I wouldn't do it because then the whole tray is hot. And so you would have to wait for the tray to cool down and the item. So for me, it's kind of a no, but I know some people who have the older machines actually do that. It's a great
Great.
way to make
There's
oh, go ahead.
No, I love that you reference to older machines. I think it's just a reminder to always check your manual. Like,
Yes.
Yeah.
That is a great question. Is it okay to line the trays with foil or parchment or silicone mats, and anything you should not line with?
Parchment and silicone mats work really well. I would avoid foil just because when it freeze dries, it gets stuck often, and you don't want to have to sit there and shave off foil. And I'm sorry, go ahead,
Yeah.
Tim.
Oh, I was just going to say, most of the manufacturers actually sell silicone mats and pre-cut parchment paper to fit whatever size trays you're using. So those, and I agree with the aluminum foil. Don't use that. It's basically sticky things. It is best to have some sort of a mat so that it doesn't stick to your tray. It helps make cleanup a little easier as well.
So another great question. Kelly wanted to know, she said in your photo, you showed veggie snacks in a plastic bag with a twist tie in your gift section.
Mhm.
How long will those stay good prior to gifting?
If you're making them for long term, you want to use a Mylar bag. And when I did the mints, that's the way I do it when I'm sending it off. So I sent a bunch of those mints and marshmallows out to Texas, and they were in Mylar bags with freeze dry, I'm sorry, with sealed, and I actually use oxygen absorbers in them. For something like if I know tomorrow I'm gonna be meeting with my kids' soccer team or something like that, I would take those for those events where I know they're going to eat them on site immediately. For anything longer than I would say a couple of hours, you want to stick to a vacuum sealed bag or a Mylar bag. But if it's something quick and easy that you can literally go from a vacuum sealed like container, the jars, directly to the person, you can get away with the cutesy little things like I did in the picture. Honestly, that didn't last as long as it looks like it did. It was eaten after the picture.
Another great question. Someone said, so can you make like, let's see, sorry. Can you make a quick bread batter or muffin batter and then freeze dry it and bake it later?
Mm.
I'm going to be honest, I'm actually planning to try that this summer with a bunch of recipes. So I will have to let you know. But if anyone else has done it, that'd be a great question to answer.
I
Paige,
think my
I can.
only, oh, go ahead, Penny.
No, I just did a big batch. I bake a lot with sourdough, and my sourdough kind of ran away from me. Like I had 3 quarts worth of sourdough, so I freeze dried it. And I need to make sure that my first batch was a fail. My second batch, I was able to use the controls to lower the heat because remember, Tim says it heats it up in order to drive the water off. Well, I had it too high and I killed my first batch. But that's kind of an example of using a batter to freeze dry. And I have not tried muffin mixes or pancake. I mean, I've done pancake mixes that are just been the ingredients, so they weren't all freeze dried. But I would think it would work, but it might take a little tweaking on the reconstitution side because what is it going to do to your leavenings that you have in there? So I know that with my sourdough, I had to make adjustments because I was killing it off while because the freeze dryer has to get to temperature to drive the water out of the product. So I don't know why it wouldn't work, but I mean, I'm waiting for Shalinda.
I would be a little cautious. I mean, I'm really excited to hear what Shalinda reports back later. because the issue is that both baking soda and baking powder, which are generally the leaveners used in quick breads, are activated by when they're exposed to liquid. Baking powder that's double acting will react once when it comes into contact with liquid and acid. But then again, in the oven with heat, baking soda could be deactivated. So I would, I would experiment, but maybe not a big bet.
Yeah.
One
Yeah,
more
that's
question. I think we have a couple good questions to answer, and then I think we're going to run out of time. Someone had said, "What temperature would you do yogurt smoothies? What temperature would you do that?" She's asking.
So there's two ways you could do the yogurt smoothies. If you're planning to make those yogurt bites, you could just run a yogurt kind of way. If you're planning to use it as an actual smoothie, you could just push start and let the machine pick itself. Um, I'll try to see if I can't pull up the exact recipe for that. But in general, yogurt's not complicated. Now, again, that's if you're not doing anything but yogurt itself.
So,
As
and one last question, because we're 7:55 already, is that someone asked, are there any freeze drying communities you recommend we join? And I'm going to ask our panel, rather than responding out loud, if there are any, if you could put those in the chat. I think that would be great for everybody. Anything that you recommend? Or any places, any good forums or Reddit subreddits, things like that that you found helpful? Maybe you could share that with our audience. And then we've had several people ask us questions related to sort of getting a chance to get access to a freeze dryer before you buy. And, that's really going to vary depending on your location. I know some of the local Master Food Preserver county-based programs have freeze dryers. And so that would be the first place to start, would be to contact your local county. We'll put the link for UC Master, our main website that lists all the different county offices. So that would be a place to start, to ask them whether or not they have a freeze dryer available either for you to use, or they may have some great in-person classes. And then other than that, I don't know that we, and the panel, feel free to answer, would know of any private kind of groups that would have, that rent them or things like that. I know I don't have any information about that in my area, and I'm in Central California.
I don't know
anybody
if
else
they
has
have them,
anything.
but my local library has a library of things that you can go and check out, popcorn makers and pressure canners and things. Don't know about freeze dryers. That's a pretty high-end item. So, but it's worth asking. I mean, if there's enough interest, maybe they would actually provide something like that, even if it was to, I don't know how they would check it out, because they're big machines and they're heavy. So may not be the best thing to try to check out, but I haven't found one.
I'm putting a link into where to find your county-based Master Food Preserver program, because I know many of our counties have purchased or are purchasing freeze dryers, because there's so much interest in this right now. So I will share that in the chat.
Great. Well, gang, we need to keep going here. We got a few more things to remind you of. You can always check out what's coming up right now. Coming up on Saturday, June 6th, we've got a stone fruit extravaganza. We're going to be talking about apricot, peaches, and plums. And also on the 23rd of June, I'm excited about this one, all things avocados. And Shalinda, is the one that inspires me with those little cubes of guacamole. I think that's great. There are QR codes here that you can go and check out on our website to see these upcoming events. And then the session that's being recorded today will also be put up on our YouTube channel that we'll make available for you as well. We do ask that, when we finish today, you're going to get, oh, wait a minute, I'm on the wrong slide. Sorry. We do have our Ask a monthly Ask a Master Food Preserver program. It's the second Wednesday of each month, and it's just a conversation. It's really a time to just have a conversation. And we also have it in Spanish on the fourth Wednesday of each month from 1 to 2 p.m. So it's just an opportunity. If you're really into food preservations and you've got questions, you can always come to those and we'll have a discussion. We have a helpline that you can also try, and submit your questions, and we have a whole group of master food preservers that take those on and will provide you with an answer within a few business days. We try to get those turned around as quickly as possible. You can sign up for our monthly newsletter. We are on Facebook. We're also on Instagram. It is a way for you to keep connected, and you know then what's coming up in the near future. I would be interested in knowing, and I think we'll see it on our survey, how many of you saw this class being advertised through some of these social media sites that we have. The QR codes work. If you're a quick writer, you can jot down the URLs, but you can always go to the main website and get connected on our social media channels. So as I mentioned before, and Shalinda mentioned too, we have a handout that has the recipes that we talked about and the means and methods that we talked about. When you leave the Zoom room, it's going to pop up on the screen, and we want you to complete it, please. Because we're grant funded, we always have to be able to kind of justify who we are and how we work. And once you've finished that, then you'll get a link for the handout. And I think that is the end of our session today. Thank you all for coming and participating. We're really happy to see the interest in this class. And from here on, have a great, well, we're almost at the weekend, a great rest of your week, and happy preserving in any means that you find the most effective for you and your family. So thank you, and good night, everyone.